Hello and welcome. I'm Jeff Allen, and welcome to my 7th annual UCF Football Roundtable. And this year, I'm delighted that this episode is a crossover show with To Your Point, the monthly roundtable show that I host with the Sons of UCF. I've brought together some of the best and the brightest to cover and talk about UCF, so let's get to introducing our esteemed panel, and we'll kind of go clockwise in the order of the 4-box that they are in. First up, we will introduce from the Black and Gold Banneret, co-host of Around the Kingdom and the voice of UCF softball, ELO, Eric Lopez. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. I believe me and Adam are the originators. We've been through every edition of this roundtable, all 7.
You guys are OGs. Yep.
Wow. Very honored.
Yep. Great to have you here. Of course, on the Orlando Sentinel, the man who covers the UCF beat, Matt Murschel. Matt, thanks for being on with us again. This is year 2 for you.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about that. Keep going. Man, I can build some tenure for this.
Yeah, we'll keep this train rolling all that long. Joining us for the first time, the Daytona Beach News Journal. He also covers the UCF beat for that paper and website, Chris Boyle. Hello, Chris. Welcome aboard.
I'm not the best nor the brightest, but I'm here, so that's good.
Very understated. All right. And from the Sons of UCF, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Adam Eaton. Hello, sir.
I'm a little confused. I'm usually behind the screen, so I'm kind of disoriented being on To Your Point on this side, Jeff, but excited to be a part of this group and can't wait to talk some UCF football.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So, let's get down to it, and we're going to go right off the bat because, this is the question that everybody wants to know. Who will be QB1 when the Knights kick off the season? We're recording on Wednesday the 20th, 8 days from now. Who will be the man in the center spot taking the snap? Eric Lopez, you get first shot.
I mean, that's just going to be fun because we've got a trend going where it seems like it's going to be multiple quarterbacks. Really, whoever starts game 1 doesn't end up starting the season. But I think to start the year, I'm going to say, in a bit of a surprise, I'm going to say it's Ja'Carri Brown. He's very much improved. I spoke to him at media day. He's got the legs and speed. I'm not saying he's going to finish the season as QB1, but I think he starts the year at QB1. But I think this is going to be a revolving door throughout the season.
Matt, what do you think?
I'm going to go with Cam Fancher, another surprise. I think Cam's done a relatively good job in camp so far. He's the most experienced quarterback they have. And I agree with Eric that, Scott Frost talked about this the other day that, listen, they've got such a window between game 1 to game 2, and then game 2, you get a bye week before you go to game 3. So I think, they could take a serious look at all 3 of these guys again after the game 1 performance. I do believe Ja'Carri Brown will probably end up being used at some way, shape, or form in the game as like a special package type situation, maybe in goal line or inside the 20 in the red zone. So I think you will see 2 quarterbacks, but I think Cam Fancher is going to start the season.
All right, Chris Boyle, what say you?
I'm so tempted just to pick the word "or" as the quarterback. I think the only thing that I think has been made clear, and that was kind of brought to light Monday when we met with Scott Frost, is that they're not going to try to rotate all 3 guys. I think that's really one of the few things that seems to be off the table. But I do think multiple quarterbacks are going to get looks. I'm going to agree with Matt. I think right now Cam Fancher does seem to be trending that direction. I think he's, from what we've seen in the open portions of practice, he's kind of consistently run with the first team offensive line and tempo drills. And I think, the first day or 2, you just wonder whether it's a narrative to really meet that it is a true open competition when Fancher, for the most part, when we saw in the spring, was with the 3rd unit. But I think the more we've gone into August and the more we've seen with him working with some of their top skill players and their top offensive linemen, I think that does start to mean something after a while. So I've kind of done a 180 on this, and I think it will be Cam Fancher getting the first crack of the whip.
All right, Adam.
Yeah, tough going last on this one, but I'm going to say I'm going to take a clean sweep here with Matt and Chris. I'm also going to go Cam Fancher. I think he's the first one to trot out on the 28th, and kind of checking in with people that are on the scene and some folks that I know there. I think there's 2 things that I've heard a lot that Scott Frost has talked about. 1, minimize mistakes, minimize turnovers, and 2, who can run the operation. And if you're doing just a checklist, a raw checklist, it feels like those are two boxes that Cam Fancher checks probably a little bit better than the other guys right now. So I think coming out of this camp, I think those are two things they're valuing: who can get him out of the operation, who can get in the huddle, who can get to the next play, and who can value the football and get it to the playmakers. I think Cam Fancher has got that edge right now based on just what we've all observed. But I agree with everybody else. I do think this is not a situation where the guy who starts game 1 is guaranteed to start game 3, for example, against North Carolina. So, but I also agree. I think, with Elo, you just think about Scott Frost, guys, and what he's done offensively, what he's done, with his systems. I just find it hard to believe that he's going to have an athletic specimen like Jakari Brown and not find a way to get him involved in some way, shape, or form in the offense. So I think you may see Cam trot out first, but I don't think that means the quote unquote competition is over just because of that.
I mean, I'm not sure that fans want to hear these words, but to Gus Malzahn's credit, he did find a way to use Jakari Brown the final month of the season. You think about it, how frequently was he used as almost a short yardage back and near the red zone? And I can think of the touchdown he scored against Arizona State as one example. They did find ways to get him out there, and I think it would serve Scott Frost well to do something similar to give teams other things to think about, right? And I agree with you that whether it's Brown specifically or whether they're going to find ways to give some of these unique playmakers the football in space. I think that's going to be one theme that they are trying to do. And I think another player that kind of falls in line with that, he's not a quarterback, but Dwayne Thomas Jr. I think they're going to find a lot of different ways to get him involved too.
It's obviously a very fluid situation. Of course, we knew who the quarterback was going to be starting last season, and look how that turned out, right? So last year was totally a fluid situation. So let me ask you this, though. I mean, will that cause frustration or problems if we have to play multiple quarterbacks again in 2025?
I don't think so. I mean, I think at this point, like Scott Frost said, we're going to do whatever it takes to win games. So I think that what they're going to do is figure out who are the best guys that make the system work and try to deal with that. And if it means it's going to be Jakari or Cam or Taven at some point, coming in, I think you do whatever needs to be done. Now, as we've talked about, Scott made it very clear they're not going to go 3 quarterbacks. He just feels like that just takes, you lose rhythm in games and it's too hard to get guys in and out. And they really want to make sure they give the guy who's going to be the number 1 enough opportunities with the number 1s in practice. So I think 2 makes sense. But again, if Cam struggles early on and Jakari struggles, Taven's probably going to make an entrance at some point. You do whatever it takes to win the game. If he comes off the bench and leads them to a win, let's say in a game, I think that it's hard to kind of look over that. So it's really tough to say that, it's just going to be limited to one of these guys.
It's worth mentioning, too, since with Jackson, he's the youngest of the 3, has eligibility. I don't think they want to rush him. I think when he's ready, he will get snaps. I honestly, I would be shocked if this season is not a multi-quarterback start season once again. I think it's set up for that. I think in a lot of ways, there's construct for anybody. Matt knows this, and Chris knows this. Anybody that's been on campus, there's a lot of construction going around the stadium right now with the Raft Towers. In a lot of ways, I feel like that is a great description of year 1 in Scott Frost's return. Is a lot of construction, and I think they're building stuff as the season goes. And that could mean, and one of those areas could be the quarterback, deal. So we'll see how the year plays out. But I don't think these guys are just going to rush a guy not ready. Whereas I would say, I think Gus panicked at times last year when he pulled the trigger. Remember, he started Colson in the Cincinnati game?
Yeah.
That lasted like a drive. Yeah, like that was nuts. He basically what's going on here? I don't think this staff will do that. I don't think they will do that. They're going to play whoever they feel is the best guy that is ready to play on that given football game and try to help them win.
I wonder if this is something worth kind of talking about too. I think Fancher, if I'm not mistaken, is the only player of the 3 that's started a season opener, and he's done so at 2 other places, Murschel and at Florida Atlantic. So it might be worthwhile to have that experience of knowing what a first game atmosphere and knowing what those situations feel like. And we've heard from Frost, some of those intangible things matter, commanding a huddle, ownership of and trust in the teammates, ownership of the playbook, those types of intangible things that come with experience. So that might be, if you're looking at a 1A, 1B, 1C situation like he's trying to describe, it's those fine margins that may end up making the difference when it comes to the nomination of a starter to begin the season.
And I think a lot of those two guys is what are the players around the quarterback look like? What does the offensive line look like? What are the skill position players look like? There may be different looks that a quarterback just isn't able to accomplish based on the players around him, right? So I think you have to get a feel for all 11 guys. I know we talk about the quarterback, and obviously that's the top spot. I get it, but there are 10 other guys in that huddle, and how does the quarterback complement all 10 of those guys? How do those guys complement the quarterback? I think that all has to come together in some respects. So I think, who are the playmakers on receiver? Right. Like, I know we've talked about wide receiver. Is somebody out there going to kind of step into that role? Right. And if that's the case, do you need a Ja'Cory Brown who can maybe open things up? Right. Do you need a Taven Jackson, who Chris and I talked about this recently, has the best pure arm of anybody on this quarterback staff? Right. Do you need someone who can really throw a guy open, or do you need somebody who can manage a game like Cam Fancher? I think you're going to look at all those situationally, but I think we focus on the quarterback. But what do the rest of the 10 guys on the huddle look like? What does UCF need to make those 10 guys make sense? And I think that's what Scott Frost will do. And I think it's really fascinating too. And I'm curious, I know Matt and Eric, you've been covering the team for a while. Frost has like the ultimate trust of this fan base again, which is wild considering he left this fan base and left everybody upset and everybody mad. But it seems like he's got the ultimate trust in this fan base now, that they think he'll make the right decision, whatever that looks like. It doesn't hurt you have McKenzie there also, I think, helping that as well. But I think it's a wild twist where, Scott Frost and the checkered shirt got out of town and everyone was getting their pitchforks out, and now he's back and we trust every decision he's going to make. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, especially with quarterbacks the rest of the season.
Let's not forget too that you mentioned McKenzie. McKenzie went through this in 2016, and he went through. He wasn't the starter. Justin Holman was the starter. And then McKenzie was kind of, okay, you're the guy now. Scott Frost went with him, and then at the end of the year, in that Cure Bowl, remember, he was getting booed off the field, and that really kind of shook him up a little bit. In fact, he wasn't sure if he was going to come back to play, and took Scott Frost to bring him back. But he has that kind of, he's been through that, so he could say to a guy, hey, listen, I've been through the ups and downs of being in this position here. Obviously, here's what it's going to take to get through that. And I agree with what Chris said. Put a guy in there who's got experience. You started a bunch of seasons, see what happens. And if you want to move stuff around, see what, you can do that. But again, if the offensive line struggles and they can't protect, well, maybe Cam Fancher's not the guy. Maybe you need Ja'Cory who can run out of the pocket a little bit more, who can run and throw the ball out of that backfield. Maybe you need someone else. So I think that a lot of that will be seen over the first two games to see maybe where they fit in and who works best in that system.
Yeah, I was tempted to say Ja'Cory Brown as QB1 myself, but I kind of feel like in this first game, Scott's going to want to use his experienced players to try to set the tone and get things off to a good start. But we shall wait with our bated breath for the announcement from Coach Scott Frost in the coming days. All right, moving on to topic number 2, who do you think will be the breakout player for the Knights in this 2025 campaign? Let's go with Adam to start things this time around.
Yeah, I get to go first, so I get to steal a name probably the rest of the guys are thinking about, but a name that continues to jump out at practices, and we're seeing it in the 15, 20 minutes that we get from a media perspective, is Waden Charles, a wide receiver. A true freshman. Obviously, this is a receiver core that's young, not a ton of experience at the P4 level, but he's come in and garnered rave reviews from his teammates. Miles Montgomery and Dwayne Thomas have raved about his work ethic, and Dwayne Thomas told me he doesn't look like a freshman. He doesn't practice like a freshman. He doesn't prepare like a freshman. So I think you're looking for somebody who can kind of step out and break out a little bit. I think that receiver room is still a tad unknown. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. So I think Waden Charles is a name that you're going to hear a lot being called. And I think hopefully by the end of the season, he's kind of stepped into that role as the top receiver for the Knights.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I also think another guy that's kind of shown in camp so far is Antoine Jackson, the junior cornerback. I think almost was a little bit overlooked going into the calendar year. Had hip labrum surgery in the offseason, was good enough to start as a true freshman at East Carolina 2 seasons ago. The ball skills are there. I think they've been overwhelmingly apparent from both what we've seen in person and what we've seen from the highlights that have been released from some of these practices. But they need somebody to step up there at that second corner spot. I think Jaden Bellamy is going to be the other starter from the transfer from Syracuse. that position came open kind of by surprise. Everyone expected Chase and Johnson to be the starting corner at the beginning of the year when he came back, and then he transferred again to USC, and that, he'll be missed, I'm sure. He's reuniting with Trevon Reed out there, the position coach, and I think that spot was wide open. They brought in a lot of defensive backs in the portal, and it seems like, at least based on merit, Antoine Jackson's kind of run with that role, and I think he's really emerged as a potential starter there to begin this season.
All right, Matt, who's your pick?
I'm going to go with John Walker. I think a guy who didn't get to play last year, was hurt all last season. Lots of expectations going in, highly ranked coming in from high school, guy who's got an opportunity to come in and now plays. He's got so many good players around him. I think there's opportunities to build a good rotation with that group where he can come in and not have to be all eyes on him. He can also move around a little bit. I think that's going to be huge for them. I think just basically talking with him and some of the other players, you get the idea that he's, this is a big chance for him. This is an opportunity. He could have gone elsewhere, going into the season. There were some other schools that came after him really hard, other Power 4 schools. So I think this gives him an opportunity to go out there and really kind of, showcase his talent, get out there and see what's going on. And they need that, because I still believe this defense, we haven't seen it in a while. They need a someone to step up and kind of take the identity of this group. We saw it with Shaquem, when during his time there. They need someone who's that kind of player, whether it's going to be John or someone else. They need that on the defensive side. They just really haven't had that. They need someone who has big personality and someone who could kind of be the face of that group. And John has an opportunity to do that.
All right, Elo.
Just the negative of going last. I know how Adam feels. Boyle and Murschel took my picks. I was funny. I had to write it down. I'm like, all right, he took my pick. I'll go with my backup plan. Then Matt took my boy Walker, because I was going to go with Walker in this regard. Remember, Adam knows this. Last year when that injury, we heard about the injury. I said that was a significant loss that would impact them in the season. And I debated that with Trace, and people were arguing, oh, you're making a big fuss about that. I think that hurt the defense last year, among many things. But losing him last year really caused a big effect on them. So I think Murschel's right on the money. I think Boyle's on the money. They need a defensive back to step in there. I think Adam's right about somebody as a wide receiver is going to step up there. It could be the youngster. If I had to go I'm going to go with plan D here, since nobody's taken. I don't know if this counts, because there's so many new faces and guys where some of these guys have played elsewhere, but like a Dwayne Thomas, that may not be a breakout guy, but to a lot of UCF fans, they don't know who he is. I think a whiteout is going to break out. I'll go with him as a possibility. I acknowledge that may not be as big of a limb as Adam's pick, but I do think Dwayne Thomas. I think receivers, defensive back, and John Walker are probably your leading candidates, though. So I think everybody in this panel nailed it.
Elo's got a really strong argument for being number one in the next question in the snake draft here.
See, now I could change things up there. You never know.
Well, let's not forget, too, that Dwayne Thomas also has the ability to be in the return game. And yes. I think that's a good pick as well, because, as I've said many times in the press box, I know Chris has heard this. I think, Elo, you've heard me scream this out. When is someone going to return a kick, for a touchdown? We haven't seen that in a long time. And it'd be nice to see that return game get some speed in it and maybe have some guys with that ability. And Dwayne Thomas is a guy who definitely probably could do something like that.
And that was a part of the Frost success when he was here, was the special teams with Mike Hughes, and that kind of bleeded over even to the early Heupel years with obviously the late Otis Anderson among them. That's a great point. Special teams has been non-existent here for a little while. That helped UCF a lot, especially in 2017.
I think Thomas is a perfectly fine pick. He's only got 30 career receptions in his 2 seasons at Charlotte. So, and he's, to me, he's going to be one of the focal points of this team, whether it's in truly a slot role or whether they use him out of the backfield or, any variety of ways to get him into space. They do seem to really like his ability to make people miss it when he's got the ball in his hand.
And he loves those gadget guys. Yeah.
He told me at media day that he's been working in the backfield a little bit. He's been getting handoffs, so they're trying to find ways to get him in space. I think, when asked at media day too, he said, "What's his biggest trait?" He said he wants to be versatile. Right. So
they're
I think
a bit thin back there too now with Tavion Swint's injury. They've only got 3 real scholarship running backs, so I wouldn't rule it out as being a pretty regular feature of the offense.
Let's not forget the last kickoff for a touchdown by UCF. Could anyone answer that trivia question?
Otis Anderson, 2019?
No.
Killins?
That was a punt, right?
Mike Hughes.
Mike Hughes
Yeah.
against USF in the
Yeah.
and which is Scott Frost. So there you go. So I mean, there you go.
Was Killins kick against ECU earlier that year? Is that what happened?
Yes.
What's that?
Yes. That was earlier in the year. The
Kickoff
Achilles
return
one
against
was
East
earlier in the
Carolina
year.
was earlier in that year? All right.
Yeah.
That Mike Hughes, the biggest kick return in the history of the program, won that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Killins also had a touchdown kick return against Michigan too. So boy, that has been a long time since we've seen that. That's for sure. So, John Walker was going to be my pick. So, because I really think if he anchors this defense, that's going to be great news for UCF because that's going to allow other guys to also make plays. My second pick, I'm going to go Miles Montgomery. He did not get a lot of touches with RJ Harvey in the house, but when he did touch the ball, he was productive, and I think he's going to be able to build on that. And gee, as I'm saying this, defense and running game, those are good ingredients if we can get a lot of that happening as far as that goes. All right, so with the 2025 campaign, not only do we have a slew of new players, we got a whole slew of new coaches as well. So which assistant coach will have the biggest impact? Chris, I'm going to let you go first.
Well, I think the obvious answer kind of screams out that Alex Grinch would be one of the ones. I mean, I think as defensive coordinator, his hire was a bit of a lightning rod, if we're honest with it, with how things fell apart at USC. I'm going to go a little bit off the board, though. I'm going to say, on a broad scale, I think Kenny Martin. Retaining him was a really important move, not only to keep John Walker in the fold, considering that he recruited Walker to campus, but this is a guy that's proven that he can develop some good talent. I mean, Lee Hunter emerged as a all Big 12 caliber player under his tutelage over the last few seasons. Ricky Barber played 4 years under Martin here, and they also played it for him at Western Kentucky as well. He's a very good recruiter, a good position coach. Was a person that Scott Frost made it a point to keep on staff, and he led the recruiting charge in the portal. You remember their first portal addition was R.J. Jackson, the defensive tackle from Tulsa. So it made it pretty clear right away what Frost thought of Kenny Martin and his value to the team and to the program. So I think for me, he's certainly an impact guy on and off the field.
Adam?
Yeah, I'll go off the board. We were just talking about it, but I'm going to go Pete Alomar, who is the special teams coordinator. We've talked a little bit about special teams. Not only the return game has been sound, but I think UCF was one of the worst teams last year in terms of having kicks blocked, both in punt and field goal protection. Those have been units that have been maligned, especially under the Gus era. And so I think you've got to get special teams to be sound. Obviously, we saw challenges in the kicking game last year, rotating through a couple different kickers. Now we hope that's been solidified. So I think special teams is the third unit we forget a lot about, but we can all see it's cost UCF some games, some key points over time, and we haven't used it as a weapon to also either get good field position or score points on their own. So I think if Pete Alomar can clean up special teams, can make it a weapon, a third unit, as we talked about on the return game, but also mitigate some of those disastrous plays, those punt blocks, those kick blocks, some extra points. I think that'll be a huge win for the Knights alone. So give me Pete Alomar. 20 plus years of coaching, was most recently at Rice, spent a bunch of time at Stanford where he coached a guy named Christian McCaffrey, by the way, turned out to be a pretty good return player. So hopefully Pete Alomar can get that special teams unit correct. So I'm gonna go off the board. Give me Pete Alomar as my impact coach.
All right, Elo.
I'm going to go Sean Beckton, the other UCF alum that's back on the staff that's kind of under the radar, with KZ getting the attention. Sean Beckton was a great receiver who played here in the 90s. He's been on multiple UCF staffs throughout his career, including Frost's first regime, and he's always been successful. I would argue, and I do a lot of lists. I would argue he's been the greatest assistant coach in UCF football history, considering all the contributions he's been as a wide receiver coach, as a defensive back coach. He has produced a ton of NFL guys. Just announced recently here, Mike Sims-Walker, wide receiver, going into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. Sean Beckton had a hand in that. just like he did with the Brandon Marshalls of the world, just like he did with Jordan Akins when he was coaching tight ends under Frost's staff the first time around. And I don't think it was an accident in the Scott Frost introduction speech when he was introduced as head coach in December. The first person he mentioned was Sean Beckton and how he is Mr. UCF. And with this young core of wide receivers, this is the guy I would trust to develop these guys and bring the most out of them. So I will say from Sean, I think Sean Beckton is to have him back here at UCF just feels right for this program.
And Matt, what about you?
Well, I'm going to go with an obvious one. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Milton. I mean, listen, no position on this roster is going to have more eyes on it than quarterback. And especially with the quarterback competition going on and three guys kind of going at it for the last, 8 months. So you're going to need a quarterback who's obviously been there before, as I mentioned before, has had the ups and downs, a guy who can play psychologist, be a therapist, when it comes to when things are going bad, things are going down, and a guy that all three quarterbacks have told me, really understands the offense, Scott Frost's offense, well enough that that's what they really lean on him for, is the fact that he knows exactly what to get from this offense, what you could do and what you can't do. And I think in a season like this, and when we talked about it early on about, is there going to be the same guy as a starter, from week 1 to week 5? I think that's where Mackenzie comes in. Can he kind of keep this group together, make sure they don't lose focus? They seem like they're friendly. They seem like they all like each other. Can he keep that going on? Based on what happened last year, I mean, that was a mitigated disaster in the quarterback room. So to have a guy maybe who's in a first year, yes, he's young. Yes, this is his first real, assistant job. But I think being kind of relatable to those quarterbacks is going to be huge for them as they move forward in this season, because they're going to need to lean on that guy when things kind of maybe get tough here or there down the road.
Yeah, and I tell you what, the fact that, KZ knows adversity as well as anybody does. And you can also look to the fact too, and I've said this many times, he was an assistant. He was a quarterback coach for Dylan Gabriel. So he's done the job before. And so to draw on all that experience, what he learned with Scott Frost, what he learned with Josh Heupel, yeah, I do agree with you on that. And then, I want to evolve this a little bit too. So which side of the ball do you think is most important to thrust the team forward? Offense or defense or special teams?
Well, I think I'll say this. I would go with the line of the trenches, offensive line, starting there, because this team is going to want to run the football, and that helps. Whoever the quarterback is will be helped by a good offensive line. But we don't know about this offensive line. Is all these new faces, are they guys that are quality starters who just for whatever the reason didn't have to get the opportunity, got snubbed at a previous place, or did they not play in the previous place because they weren't good enough and they're only going to play here because there's a spot open? That's going to be a factor. And I think the defensive line, I think we would agree might be the strongest position of this team, but they have to deliver. They have to deliver that, because there are questions in the secondary. And if this defensive line doesn't produce to the abilities that they have, then this defense is going to struggle. So, and I think Matt has said this since day one of the Big 12. The trenches will decide how competitive can UCF compete in the power conferences. You have to compete in the trenches to have a chance. And UCF, unfortunately, has not been able to in the first 2 years of the Big 12 for a variety of reasons. Not necessarily quality. I mean, the offensive line at times has done a good job, but the depth hasn't been there. The physicality hasn't been there. The size hasn't been there that has been in the Big 12. So to me, those two spots, just tell me how they do, and that tells you where the direction of this team is and the program's going.
I think because there are so many question marks about quarterback and offensive line and wide receiver, the defense has to be that has to lead this team, and if we see the types of results that Alex Grinch's defense has put up at the end of his tenures at Oklahoma and USC, more so than at the beginning of his tenures at those schools and at Washington State, this team's going to struggle to win football games. I don't think that's really any secret. They've got to be able to win early downs and allow their defensive pass rushers an opportunity to make an impact. They've got to be able to take the football away. They have a lot of guys in that secondary that have notched multiple interception seasons. You look at Phil Dunham, I think is poised for a big season. He's got 3 interceptions in each of the last 2 seasons at FAU and Indiana. You look at Damari Henderson potentially coming back. Just a couple of years ago, he had a Walter Camp National Player of the Year performance against Oklahoma State, where he took the ball away 3 times. So you're going to need those players and that unit as a group to be a steadying force. Maybe not absolute domination, but you need them to be a steadying force to give your offense a chance to grow into itself and to find an identity and eventually a quarterback to rally around.
Yeah, I would agree. I think defense has to be the key for this. In fact, when I was writing my preview stories, I was pointing out the fact that this defense is probably going to carry this team early on. I mean, it's probably going to have to do the lot of the bulk of the work, because I just think it's going to take time. I mean, yes, we've been hearing how fast this offense is going to be. Maybe not as fast as it was the first time around, but to get there, you're going to have to stop the run. We saw what happened 2 years ago when they couldn't stop the run. Everyone ran all over them, especially in the Big 12. Now they're going to have to stop, the quarterback, as Chris pointed out, with the secondary. I mean, this is a league that's got 8, 9 quarterbacks who are returning, who are probably going to have opportunities to be among the top quarterbacks in the country. So they're going to get tested week in and week out. To me, the defense has really got to be where it's at.
Yeah, Jeff, I look at a number, right? If you look at Scott Frost as a head coach and play caller, I know it got weird at Nebraska, so he wasn't calling plays for some of that, but look at him as a head coach play caller. You throw out the min and the max. So his top year ever, 2017 with UCF, 40-plus points a game. His worst year ever, 2020 COVID year in Nebraska. You take those 2 years out, and he's about a 28 point per game play call score as a head coach. Can UCF get to 28 points offensively? And if they can't, can the defense keep them in games, keep teams below that 28 point threshold? I think that's a number I'm looking at. If we can get to 28 points, can the defense keep teams underneath that? And if we can't, to Chris and Matt's point, the defense is going to have to be even that much more stout. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on this defense until we figure out, can this team be a 28 point per game scoring team, greater or less than? And if not, the defense has to really kind of carry the slack on both sides of it. So I think for me, the number's 28. And I think that's something I'm going to keep an eye on and track throughout the season, is how close do we get to that Scott Frost average as a play caller and scorer.
I can always count on Adam to go inside the numbers. That's
the numbers guy. I will say, I mean, I think the recipe for UCF, not just this year, but in the future, to contend in the Big 12 is to have one of the best defenses in the conference. To me, that's where that's how they've won conference championships in the past. The thing that worries me, I think the defense, one thing I do like in talking to the players, is it seems like the coaching staff has simplified some things, especially on defense. And they talked about how, they're reacting more so than thinking, whereas last year they were thinking. And I think we saw in the last couple of years, for example, you had an inexperienced defensive coordinator who's not, first time on the job. And then last year with Ted Roof, maybe in his better days were behind him, missing assignments, gaps. Maybe you clean all that up. That will help the defense. But I will say this, in the Big 12, I still, as good as this defense could be, you're going to have to score points, to Adam's point, to his point on this. And so they got to find a way to score, because this defense might play well and keep you in games, but if you don't score, it's not going to matter in the Big 12. In the American, you can get away winning a 17-10 game. I don't know if you can win a 17-10 game in the Big 12 consistently.
Well, it's funny. The knock on Alex Grinch coming out of USC was his system was too complicated, right? A lot of opposing scouts and teams said it was too complicated. Guys didn't know where they were supposed to be at, right? We haven't heard a lot of that so far with this scheme with these guys. Now, again, granted, we don't get a ton of time with them. So I think it's curious, though. Chris mentioned something earlier. We forget that Alex Grinch was a Broyles Award finalist twice. And he was the hottest defensive coordinator also in 2017, by the way, at Washington State. And then what did he do? He followed Lincoln Riley to 2 next stops. So that's kind of where things went off the rails. So is that a cultural issue with the Lincoln Riley programs and the way that defense runs, or is that an Alex Grinch issue? We're going to figure that out pretty quickly. But the knock on him post USC, and I know Matt, Chris, you guys covered college football better than anybody, was it was complicated. Guys were running around, guys didn't know where to go, guys didn't know where to get set at, and teams just had wide open plays. Again, we haven't heard a lot of that yet. We haven't heard a lot of complication, but another thing to watch defensively is, to Elo's point, how simplistic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but is this system easier for this team to grasp and not think and just go and attack and make plays?
Yeah, I would think that in that case, because it's so many new faces, that, they've got to kind of keep things on a simplification method, if you will, to help them make that transition. All right, moving to our next topic. So what do you find the same and what do you find different about Scott Frost starting his second stint? And now let's see, since I've changed the snake order twice, I think it's Matt's turn to go first this time. Matt?
Well, I think, when you think about Scott, I was around in 2016 and 2017, helping covering UCF at the time. And I thought Scott was, energetic, he's still energetic. He was still kind of going around. I thought he related well to the players. I think this time around, he's matured a lot more. I felt like, he's, when you talk to him either at the podium or off to the side, I think he, I think I think what happened to him at Nebraska really had a long impact on him, obviously. I don't think he's nearly as I don't want to say arrogant. I don't think he was arrogant 2016 and 17, but I think he was very confident. And I'm not saying he's not confident now, but I think he feels you could definitely see the maturity level here. I think he understands exactly what it's going to take to kind of have success. He's very appreciative. I think that's the word I want is very appreciative, I think, of this opportunity. And he talked a lot about, having his family around and how important that is. And we saw it the other day when he brought his little daughter, up to the podium, and had her in his hands the whole time. And the reaction from fans across it was like, oh my gosh, his coach is actually like a family guy. And the idea that he let his coaches on the first day of school, come in late to practice or they push practice back, so they could spend time with their families. I think those are all things that, I think that Scott has done, really well. I think the family atmosphere is carried over to the players. Every player I've spoken with this offseason has talked nothing but about how much family this feels like family. And this is kind of what he did in 16 and 17, where he built that tight knit, kind of community with that team. And that paid off in the 2017 season. And I think if they can replicate that this time around and continue with it, I think this is how you're going to have success. I don't know for a fact, but I felt like last year's team wasn't very connected. They kept talking about how they were, they're close friends. I didn't feel that way at all. I felt that team was kind of on their own. We talk about mercenaries into the transfer portal. I felt like there were a lot of guys like that last year who were just there to get a check. And I think this time around, it's interesting to see how most of these guys are really kind of connected. They feel like they've really kind of got to know each other. And I think that's really going to help them down the road because, last year when times got tough, guys were pointing fingers and stuff like that. This time around, who knows? Maybe these guys will be able to kind of, when things get a little bit tight, maybe they can buckle up a little bit more and have an opportunity to prove themselves and have some success. So those are kind of some of the little slight similarities and differences I've seen with Scott this season.
All right, Elo.
I think he's a much more relaxed Scott Frost, more at peace. Like, I think for this time around, he enjoys the talking to the media. Maybe not enjoys a strong word, but he understands talking to them. Whereas the first time around, you could tell he hated it. Like the less he said, the quicker he would finish. Now I think he's much more relaxed, much more open. I mean, my goodness, every time he's talking about player, what he hates about the sport right now, and Michigan, he is honest. One thing you could say is he's not sugarcoating things. He will tell you what he feels, for better or for worse. But I think he's much more at peace. And what really I noticed the most was at the Big 12 meetings when Adam actually got a chance to interview him. And Scott was very relaxed and just talking to him and shooting the breeze and talking football. And nothing against Adam, but like if Adam was there in 2016, for example, for a media day, I don't think Scott talks to him. I think Scott's like, I want to do as less as possible. Now I think he understands his role. Matt made a great point about that. I mean, he brought his daughter to a coach's press conference. Like the only other UCF coach that does that is sending Ball softball once in a while. Like, so Scott, I think, gets it. I think he's happy where he is. I think he's comfortable talking. It helps, I think, that he knows people like Matt, who was around the first time around, and he sees some familiar faces. But yeah, I think he's at much more peace where who he is now and much more open to team. Like FanFest just happened, and I saw footage where the fans were like, man, thank you for coming. And Scott was opening him. He has a way to connecting with people the way he talks, which is very unique. It's not like he doesn't yell. He just has that calm now that I don't think he had, which makes sense. He was a first-time head coach, so a lot of times you have to find yourself. I think he started finding himself in that second year towards the end of 2017, and then, that other place, whatever. I think he's happy to be here, and he's more at peace now than he was the first time around.
All right, Adam, would Scott Frost have talked to you in 2016?
I would think so, Jeff. I don't know why you wouldn't. Listen, full transparency. I didn't cover Frost in 2016-17. I wasn't even in the state at that point in time. But I think the word I would use to that you can still see, and Matt kind of touched on this a little bit, you can still see a little bit of that swagger, right? And Matt kind of said it like he wasn't arrogant, but there's a bit of swagger. I'll never forget UCF goes to Michigan, gets absolutely curb stomped by the Wolverines. And the famous quote after the game that everyone remembers is Scott Frost said, "We out-hit those guys." UCF lost by like 48 points, right? But that was the quote he said afterwards, and everyone was kind of like, what? But he's always had a little bit of that kind of quiet, confident swagger about him. And you still kind of see that, but I think to Matt's point, in a more mature way. He's very confident in his team, and he exudes that confidence. I think that's kind of the same from the first time around. The other, I guess the change, and I don't mean this in a negative way. It's going to sound negative, but I kind of piggybacking off what Matt said. I just think he's more committed. And I think when you're a first-time head coach, and I'm going to steal his press conference line, when you climb the ladder of success, people don't tell you to stop and you're happy. I think he was climbing a ladder at that point in time, right? He was thinking about what's next, where do I go, what do I do? And I think he was committed to being at UCF and wanted to do well there. But I also think he always had another eye on what's next for me. I think now he's exactly where his feet are, right? It's a common corporate phrase is be where your feet are. I think it's exactly where his feet are. His mind is here. His feet is here. His energy is here. I don't think he's looking around like he may have done the last time. I think to Matt's point, he wants to set roots down here. He wants to be here. He wants to grow here. So I think that's the difference is while he said all the right things in 2016, 2017, we've all heard the rumors about schools reaching out and talking to people and so on and so forth. I suspect that this is going to be way different this time around. He wants to set roots here. So I think he's more committed. And that's not to say he wasn't committed the first time, but I think he kind of had an eye and a ear on what else may be out there for me. I don't think that's the case here in 2025.
All right, Chris.
Like Adam, I'll preface this by saying I didn't cover UCF day to day or in person for those seasons when he was here. I will say that it does feel like the same positivity is around the program as it was in those early years in 2016, 2017. Not only in the sense of the fans, you think about like what was exciting about that hire at the time was it was so radically different than what they had just experienced. Where George O'Leary, the pro style offense, a guy had been there for well over a decade, was a face that had been seen at previous spots before. Frost was a first time head coach with this high flying offense, coaching a Heisman winner in Marcus Mariota at Oregon. So I think there was kind of a cutting edge hire at the time. And now I think there's that positivity of like, look, we know this works, right? If you're UCF, you've seen this story work in your favor. And for Frost, he knows that he's had success here, and he feels deep down that he can do it again, even if all the factors are, maybe not in his favor. With the amount of movement you have on the roster, and you have the money aspect, and you have the other new elements of the game that didn't exist back then. So I think obviously that's one of the differences. And I think maybe a positive difference is like, could you really imagine being around a better influence on learning what the current trends of the game is than spending time with Sean McVay for a year? I think that's really important. Not only we're not going to see the exact same UCF offense. I don't think you can. For one, it wears down the defense. That was pretty evident as those 2 years went along. Even when they were winning and outscoring teams, those defenses were worn out as games went on. But you have to be able to evolve, and you have to be able to show something different. And I think the Rams have done a good job over the last couple of years in evolving their offense and changing things and going with 2 tight end sets and going with 3 wides at different times and being able to show different, showcase different players. So I think all things considered, if you're at the highest level, seeing that day in, day out, even if it's only for a year, being around the right people is only going to help you, right? Being around smart people, therefore, you would imagine make you smarter. So I think you couldn't really find a better influence and a better situation to come out of to give it another opportunity as a head coach.
Yeah, I think bringing up the McVay point is really good because not only did he learn offense, but it was a great place for him to get regrounded after the disaster at Nebraska. And I know he's just spoken to that quite a bit. So how big an influence do the rest of you guys think about the McVay experiment?
I mean, he's been on record of saying it brought the joy back into him in coaching football. He was, I don't know if he's coaching football, period, if he doesn't connect with Sean McVay. So I think Sean McVay has that affection of passion in bringing football. And I believe Scott, that I think Scott was going to stay with him and stay in the NFL. If it was any other college job, he would have turned it down. I think this is the one college job he would have taken in that standpoint. And I'll say this, I wouldn't be shocked if his career doesn't end at UCF. I think it will go end in the NFL. I think that's I think he liked it there. But I think McVay is a big part of this new Scott Frost and the joy that he's coaching. And I think this piece that he has right there. And again, much more laid back. Like, Matt, do you think 2016 Scott Frost would have talked about Jeopardy and a family member playing Jeopardy back then as loosely, or talk about Ryan Sandberg and the Cubs?
I'll tell you this story. In 2016, when Frost was hired and went to the American Athletic Conference Media Days up in Newport, we all had to fly into Providence, and UCF and flew on Southwest, and I was on the flight with them, and Scott was there with the players. And on the way back, I ran into the SIDs, at the gate, and I said, "Where's Frost and the players?" And they said, "They're in the video game room." And so I walked into the arcade, and there's Scott playing pinball, and he is just working this pinball machine over and over. And I remember laughing and thinking, imagine like Nick Saban, like coming in, like playing pinball, and Frost was so relaxed. And so, the players were watching and laughing, and they were playing video games and everything. And then he got done. He saw me, and I was taking a picture with my camera, and he saw me. And so he kind of got back to normal and kind of went back and went back to their gate. And that stood out to me. That's always stood out to me. Like this idea that he was so, he was just a kid in a lot of ways at heart, I mean, and I think that at 2016, that was a season where, again, first year coaches, everyone said, it's just hard to deal with everything that you don't have that experience of understanding exactly maybe what's going on. His dad was a lifelong high school coach, so it's not like he didn't know, but it's still so much of a challenge. And I think having gone through the Nebraska thing and then now going to the NFL and dealing with that, I think that's helped him really kind of get an understanding. Okay, this is where it's going to be success. This is how I'm going to be successful, and this is what I need to do.
2.0s, as I've often said, generally do not work. What optimism do you think we have to look forward to as fans to think that it can work this time around, other than the things that we have specified so far?
I think probably some of its resources, maybe, with Scott. I mean, I think, he's got more resources now. They're in the Big 12. UCF now is getting full share, of their revenue from the Big 12. That'll help a little bit. I think the portal, as much as he was really kind of, struggled with it, I think once he gets this kind of understanding of it I think he'll be able to use that really well. Listen, if you talk about that mantra that UCF uses, is getting more out of less, Scott Frost is a great example of a coach who does that. And I think that's going to help them out in the long run, because you're not just looking for the 4 and the 5-star kids. You're going to look for 3 stars that are really going to be able to help you maybe do some things that, maybe that people didn't think were going to happen to help you have success. Look at the players that he brought in 2016 and 17 that were successful, but maybe weren't highly recruited. Adrian Killings, Otis Anderson, guys who came in and were able to do some things. I think that's going to help him have a little more success, because he's not coming in with the idea of, I've got to get 4 and 5 stars. I've got to get the top quarterback in the transfer portal. He's going to find guys that he feels like works well with them and are going to work well within the family atmosphere he's developing.
I think development is definitely the word to be excited about if you're UCF and you believe this can work a second time around. Because as Matt mentioned, you go back to some of those early recruiting classes. I think Richie Grant was a 2-star recruit. Yeah. Tristan Hill was, a 2-star recruit. So they were able to find guys that no one really gave the time of day to, or at least the big programs didn't. And they were able to develop them not only into successful college players, but eventually professional level players, and to find value in places where, other people and other coaches would have turned their heads at it. Right. So Shaquem Griffin has very publicly said that the previous regime that he was on at UCF, he would not have stayed here for, and didn't seem to want him. So it's one of many examples. So I think that's the one thing where if you're most excited about is development. And I think knowledge of all 3 phases helps too. You forget that Frost obviously has been a quarterback at Nebraska. and coached, was an offensive-minded coach. But this is a guy that played safety in the NFL, that has played special teams, learned under Bill Belichick, which I'm sure we're going to get to in a few weeks. We're asking him a million Belichick questions when North Carolina comes to town.
Who's that?
So he's seen, yeah, right. Yeah. Belichick. Who's this guy? But I think the fact that he's able to relate with players, not only on having been there and done it, but having been there in so many different roles, I think that helps too, in terms of, being able to get on the same level and to have a bond with these guys.
I think too, the other big myth is he's not doing this alone, right? We talk about culture, but we already talked about this. He brought Mackenzie Milton back, right? He brings Sean Beckton back. He's bringing guys back who know what it means. And those are the two names we talk about, but we forget about Zach Duvall, who was here at strength and conditioning. We forget about Mike Dawson, who was here. We forget about some of the players he brought back. Jordan Johnson is back. Drico Johnson is here. Dimitri Brim is here. Travis Fisher is back. It's not just Scott Frost rebuilding this culture. He's bringing in folks who kind of know what it means to be successful at UCF, to do less with more, or to do more with less, rather. And so he's not just going at this alone. He's finding guys who kind of know what it means to be in this building. The Sean Beckton Jr. is on the strength staff, right? It's not just Scott Frost walking in saying, hey, I can turn this thing around. I think everyone knows this. You're successful as a leader when you surround yourself with a great team. I think he's putting a team around him who can support his journey, his ethos of rebuilding this culture. And he's finding guys who know what it means, know how to actually work it, and can sit across from a player. We talked about Mackenzie, can sit across from a player and say, hey, I know what it's like. I was in this system. I was in your shoes. I was in this building. Here's how we can win here. I think that's super powerful. And so if you want to be optimistic, and he's not going at it alone. He's finding people that have been there, been at that level, been successful, know what it means to be here at UCF and win, and he's bringing those guys along the journey. I think that's something you can be optimistic about.
All right, so now that we've covered all that ground, it is time for our nightcap. And of course, we are going to ask each one of our panelists this question to close out the show with, and we will broach the question of, what will be considered a successful season for UCF? Back to the top of the order, and Eric Lopez.
Well, the success for this season, I think it's in two parts. Number one, on the field. Can you get to a bowl game? Can you get to 6-7 wins in year one of this construction with all these new faces? I think is a key there. I think that's going to be focused on win-losses. That's progress. I think people will feel very good about that. But I think there's even a second part to this, and that is, you guys have mentioned the word development and retaining players. Do you hit on your players that you hit, whether it be the quarterback position, the wide receivers? Okay, you hit them, they blossom. Now can you retain them? Because what you don't want to do is become what happened to Florida State, where you hit on all these players, they all leave, you have to start over, and then it blows up on you. That's hard to win. So to me, there's two parts. You get to a bowl game, but then you hit on some of these players that you've hit, either via the freshman class, whether the transfer portal, build that momentum, but then retain them to get them to buy in, to stay here and not get plucked to go somewhere else. I think those two things are the key. Can you retain and have a core to build around? And I know that's difficult in 2025 college athletics with all the transactions, but I do think you could still build a somewhat of a core in football that buy into what you're selling and not have to start over. I think that was one of the problems with Gus, is it felt like the roster was constantly in change and everybody was here for a minute. Not to say there's not going to be still some of that, but I think Scott Frost wants guys that want to be here. And I think Scott's even messages, even with the revenue sharing, is let's take care of the guys we have in-house instead of chasing the money outside. So can they get to a bowl game this year? And can you see guys that you hit on and blossom and then keep them here to build going into next year and beyond?
All right, Matt Murschel, your nightcap, please.
I think, to me, success, I've always thought that six wins would be the ceiling for them this season. And and again, I know fans expect a lot more, but, I think if they get to 6 wins, but I'm also kind of like taking the Eric's position about the idea that, listen, this is twofold. Get to 6 wins, but does this team look competitive? Is this team having fun? Are fans having fun in the stands? I mean, yes, it's tough to lose games, but if it's an exciting game and it's a back and forth game and you're thinking, oh man, we're in this game, and there's life on the sidelines and you feel like guys are, putting their heart onto it, that's important to me. I mean, if they get to 6 wins and, and yes, maybe they have some tough losses, but they were in the games and they felt like, oh my gosh, they could have won that game if this happened or this happened, not making stupid mistakes or stupid penalties. I think that's a successful season. I mean, what fans have seen the last couple of years is just, you go to the Utah game. I give an example. Last year was just, I mean, I know they were out of the running for a bowl game, but there was no life, there was no juice, there was no energy on the sidelines. West Virginia, there was no juice on the sidelines. I mean, they need to kind of have fun again, get back to having fun playing football. And if that happens, I think you'll see some of that success come about. And I think fans will obviously gravitate toward it. They'll get excited about it. And then you'll start building that fan base up. But the best thing that Scott Frost has done, I think all of them have done, is just say, listen, we're not going to go undefeated this season. Keep the expectations down really low. And then fans can kind of say, okay, that's fine. If we only go in 5 games, we knew it was going to be kind of one of those kind of years. We'll see what happens next year. I think that's very important for this year.
All right, Chris Boyle.
All right, so Elo more or less stole what I was going to say this time, so he's officially got me back. I do think bowl eligibility is a big part of it. I think that will show the right amount of progress, not only for the fan base, it also gives Scott Frost the additional year on his contract. It would lock in a 6th season at over $5 million. So there's that carrot as well at the end of the rope. And not only that, but I think it would help on the recruiting trail and with retention, because if you can demonstrate that these things are working again and that UCF has again changed its profile and become a more attractive place to play football, they have the natural resources of the weather, the amenities of Orlando and tax-free living in a rev share world, right? I think all these things are realistic things that they can sell guys on at the end of the day. But another thing I think too is avoiding capitulation. I think that's a really important thing. The last 2 years, they have melted down 5-game losing streaks in 2023 and 2024. I think avoiding that is crucial to at least give yourself a chance, whether it's, we get to November and they're 4-4 or something along those lines. They have to avoid just that long losing spell and looking like they don't belong in the league. Even if they're, losing competitively, you just have to find a way to get over the hump a couple of times. I think October is crucial. They have 3 games in October. They play Kansas at home. They play Cincinnati on the road. They play West Virginia at home. I think they have to find a way to win at least 1, maybe 2 of those games to give themselves a realistic shot of being bowl eligible down the road.
All right, Adam, your nightcap, sir.
Yeah, in the year of the internet 2025, coming onto a podcast and saying that you hope your team wins 5 or 6 games is going to be seen as loser energy or you don't know ball, right? Or whatever that cool phrase is. But the reality is for this team, guys, I think this season's success isn't going to just be measured in the win and loss column. And I think that's the reality. I think there's going to be other ledgers that we're going to have to look at. And I think 5 or 6 wins is probably the part you want to be at, right? And I know that feels like loser mentality. We should win them all. And if we don't, what are we doing? But I also think there's a reality, right, that people don't want to see. I think to me, it's, I'm going to kind of dovetail off what Elo said a little bit. I think there are 3 different things that I look at that say, I would say this is a successful season. 1, can you establish an identity? Who are you as a school? Who are you as a program? Are you this UCF fast? Are you this UCF fierce? Who are you as a program? Right now, we don't really know. We think we know where we're going to be, but there's a lot of unknown there. So I think that's 1. I think Chris kind of hit on the second one that I'm going to steal, which is, can you find and develop some young talent, some young stars on this team right now? I talked about Wade and Charles earlier. A name we didn't mention that I think is going to have a big year, Kylan Fox, another young player, right? Can you develop these young stars, young players, not just for this team, but I think Chris was saying the same thing I'm going to say, which is there's a kid, a senior in high school right now in Georgia, who's going to look at UCF and go, wait a minute, I can go there and I can get some playing time. I can get some run. I can get on the field right now. I can make an impact, right? So can you show to other kids, hey, you can come to UCF. You can play early. We're going to give you the ball. We're not going to care about your NAL. We're going to feature you in this offense, right? That could be attractive to younger kids. The third one is going to be super tricky because you don't really know where we're going here, but can you figure out QB? Now, when I say that essentially means I'm canceling out Cam Fancher and Ja'Curry Brown, who don't have a ton of eligibility left, right? But can you figure out QB? Who are you from a QB perspective? Who fits your system? Is that Taven Jackson? Do we dust off Davi Belfort at some point in time? Do we realize that Kane Archer is the future if he shows up at UCF? I think, can you kind of understand the blueprint at quarterback? If you do those 3 things, I think you can say, hey, this was a successful season. And yes, 5-6 wins, a bowl game would be helpful. Since UCF went to its first bowl game in 2025, or I'm sorry, 2005, they have not yet had back-to-back seasons that they did not make a bowl game. So they didn't make it this year. This would be the first time since that 2005 year they haven't made a bowl game in back-to-back years. So I think you want to continue to hit that high water mark. But I have bad news. This season may not just be strictly on what you see in the win and loss column. I'm sorry to everybody out there on the internet, but I do think you're going to have to look for some other things that are going to tell you that this was a successful year for UCF.
All right, and I'll take the last call with my nightcap. And it's interesting because I didn't expect this. I'm not going to go with a number either. Like, I noticed that you guys didn't pick a number, and so we're kind of all lockstep in on that. And kind of falling back to what Matt said, at the Utah game at halftime, it's pouring down rain. I wanted to cry. I seriously wanted to cry. And it's like, this is what we've become. And so the thing I want to see that makes it a successful season for me is bringing the swagger back. As we alluded to, Scott Frost brings confidence. He brings that winning attitude. We had guys that had heart that played on. I didn't see a lot of heart on UCF in the last few seasons. I won't throw RJ Harvey under the bus because he definitely had bigger heart than most, carrying the team on his back as often as he did. But that's kind of what I want to measure is, I would like to win more than 4 just to kind of make a little progress in the win column. But for me, just seeing the attitude and UCF football the way it used to be under Scott Frost the first time around. And that will do it for this year's UCF Football Roundtable, a co-branded production of Jeff Allen Sports Talk and To Your Point from the Sons of UCF. For Adam, Chris, Eric, and Matt, I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for joining us.